Hello everybody and welcome back to another video. Today I wanted to go over a couple of the news stories that have been going on recently in the Overwatch League, the coaching change we've seen with some of the Chinese teams, the retirement of Neptuno, and a little bit on this situation about Saebyeolbe, but I'm not going to focus on that too much because the situation has been resolved, so I don't want to get too much into it. But let's start with these coaching changes with the Guangzhou Charge and Hangzhou Spark. I talked a bit about the Hangzhou Spark coaching changes in a previous video because the changes were made before Week 3 of the May Melee qualifiers took place. So they went into Week 3 having these new coaching changes in place. Obviously, if you are not aware of the changes that were made, Hangzhou Spark relieved head coach Pa Jian and assistant coach Noru, I don't know exactly how you pronounce it, but those two were relieved of their coaching duties. Andante, who was an assistant coach for the team, was promoted to the interim head coaching role, and the coach mentalist, who spent some time with the Atlanta Reign last season, as well as most recently as the Billy Gaming head coach, which is the Hangzhou Spark Academy team. He was promoted to being an assistant coach for this team. So that's the new coaching staff. And we saw some improvements in their play this past weekend. They looked much better. A win over the Guangzhou Charge, a close series against the Shanghai Dragons. They looked to be getting some things together, and I think a lot of that was on the back of Shai's very strong play. He looked very good, very strong in that hit scan role. Still seeing that Gushui Bernard tank line, still seeing IDK and MCD in the backline, which I actually think that MCD has looked very good. So I think that's a strong backline there. So this is a good team. It's an interesting team, I think, to watch going forward to see how these coaching changes affect them. I've heard a lot of great things about Andante from things I've seen from other people. You know, it's like source of a 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 source type of information, but that he's apparently very popular with players and players like working under him. So he might end up just being their head coach for the foreseeable future. It really depends on how well this team is able to play going forward. So I'm curious to see how the team looks in the future and how much the change impacts them, whether it be positive or negative. Because it came at a very interesting time, right? It came before the third week of matches even took place. And, you know, it came after 2 matches for this team. And that also means, you know, it came at a time when this team was, came off 2 losses. A loss to the Philadelphia Fusion, which was somewhat close, and then a further loss to the NYXL. There was a whole, power outage situation that was going on with this team. That was a thing, you know, that was something that the coaching staff said that they felt somewhat responsible for because they didn't handle the situation properly. So maybe that has something to do with what happened. Maybe they didn't handle that situation well, and that's something that concerned the team. I don't know. You'd think that a move like getting rid of Pajian would have happened last season when he was the head coach last season as well, but it did not, and we are still seeing the repercussions now and what has happened now. So I'm curious to see what happens going forward with this Hangzhou Spark team and if these improvements continue on, or if this is a very quick band-aid fix and we still see them struggling going forward. The other team that made coaching changes is the Guangzhou Charge, which moved off of head coach Arachne and assistant coach Damon. They have not made any further announcements as of me recording this video in terms of other coaches. The only coach we know of that's on the roster still is Neko, the former Overwatch League player, of course, played for the Boston Uprising and the Toronto Defiant, and then went back to Contenders. He is an assistant coach for this team right now. That's all we got. We don't know if they have anybody else. I would assume they have plans to get more coaches, but right now that's all we know about is Neko as a coach for this team. Now this is an interesting one because the Guangzhou Chargers did not look very good. They struggled a lot in their opening 4 matches, but it's only been 4 matches. And their head coach, Arachne, is somebody who comes from a pretty good Overwatch coaching background. He was the head coach of Talon Esports before getting a job as an assistant coach with Krusty and the San Francisco Shock. and then was hired by the Guangzhou Charge back in October to be their new head coach. So he's only coached 4 matches as a head coach, but I think his connection across he'll likely have other suitors in assistant coach roles. But there was a report from Halo of Thoughts who said something about this team looking to... basically, they were looking to kind of reassess the way that they were looking, and they were looking to kind of plan different ways of kind of approaching the season, and so it's something that is gonna be interesting to follow what happens. But he basically said that the Guangzhou Charge is supposedly in the process of a staffing/internal restructure, and there is the possibility that Arachne may not stay as head coach. And then basically saying that he had left the team's official Discord and some of the Charge's personal ones, and so it was pretty clear that he was going to be moving on. You know, whether or not this was a mutual decision, whether or not Arachne basically decided, I don't want to stay here anymore, or if it was purely a decision of the organization, I don't know. But I do think it is going to be an interesting one to follow, because this team struggled a lot, and I think that it's going to be very tough to replace a head coach at this point in the season. You know, you have to get a head coach. It's early, but not many people are going to really want to take a job of a team that's 0-4, that fired a head coach after only 4 matches, that fired their head coach after last season when they had a winning record. The Guangzhou Charge have a very clear goal to win, and win as soon as possible, and they have a very, very, very bad track record of holding on to coaches. I don't think they've had a single coach for more than like a year, at least in a head coaching position. So this is a team that really needs to consider kind of what their process is, and if they are reconsidering and having like internal discussions, well, then maybe that means they're going to sign a coach they feel really good about, and they're going to go and invest in this coach and give this coach the time to be the head coach for as long as possible. But the way I look at it right now is this is a team that needs to make some moves with this coaching staff, and they need to figure things out soon, because they are falling behind very, very quickly. They are a 1-win team. I know I said they were 0-4, but they're a 1-win team. Their win was against the Valiant, but you have to beat the likes of the Spark and the NYXL, Dragons, Fusion, Hunters, Dynasty. All of these teams have shown some flashes at times, and so you got to be able to compete with them, and that's something they've been struggling to do. So we'll see what happens with them going forward, but this is an interesting one to me. From the Charge, let's move on to one of the Charge's former players announcing his retirement. That is, of course, Neptuno, who was with the Paris Eternal up until just yesterday, as of me filming or uploading this video. He announced that the team mutually parting ways. It was an agreement between the two teams, basically Neptuno saying that he didn't play up to his standards. He didn't think he was playing well enough to stay on the team, and so the team came to the decision that Neptuno should will part ways with the team. Where this team goes now, I have no idea. I would expect them to probably grab somebody from EU contenders. Some big names, obviously. New Kings just won the most recent contenders tournament. So do you look to the New Kings, and do you think, hey, maybe we grab their main support, Dridro? He's a French player. He's had some experience, obviously. Do we go for him? Do we go for somebody on one of the other top teams like Shoes Money Crew or British Hurricane or Ex-Oblivion? Who do we go for is always this kind of question of what to do. So it'll be interesting to see what the path is, because like I said, they could go after someone like Dala or Dridro or Johnny, or they could go after somebody like Cruz, who's been with this team in the past. Doesn't seem as likely, but it's possible. So it'll be interesting to see what they do, but real big shame to see Neptuno retire. I've kind of expected this, when he was not getting as much time with the Charge last season. I figured he probably wouldn't have a ton of opportunities to end up in the Overwatch League again, but he did get another opportunity, and that was short. It was always great. Neptuno is one of my favorite players of all time. 2018 Neptuno was such a treat to watch. I loved watching him play. I mean, his Mercy was arguably the best in the Overwatch League once upon a time. You know, his really, really, really aggressive playstyle, Battle Mercy, really risky resurrects that he would go for, stuff like that. I mean, he was just such a fun player to watch. And so it'll be a real shame to see Neptuno depart from the league. But, you know, I wish him the best, and I hope that he finds whatever his role is in the future. If it's a coaching role, which I think Neptuno would be great at, I think Neptuno would also be great talent, potentially. Whichever route he wants to go in, I support him, and I hope that he has a great, great future in whatever he does next. Finally, let's very briefly touch upon this Saebyeolbe situation. I don't want to talk about it too much because it's been talked about a bunch by a bunch of different people, but I just kind of wanted to give a really kind of short, brief kind of opinion on it and a little recap of what happened. So the general story, and I may miss some details here, so forgive me. I'll link to some stories in the description about it so you can kind of get a better idea of what is happening. But generally, the way the story goes, Saebyeolbe on one of his streams made some remarks about China in various different capacities. The big ones that people have been pointing to are Saebyeolbe's comments about Hong Kong and Taiwan, and his dislike of the kind of one China policy, this idea that Taiwan and Hong Kong are parts of China and not their own countries, which is something that is a very, very, very heated topic and very, very the center of a lot of different points of debate. And so to say that it is a very sensitive subject and touchy subject among people in China and in Taiwan and in Hong Kong is putting it lightly. So some statements that kind of rubbed these Chinese organizations the wrong way. There were also some comments reportedly about him saying stuff about people on the Seoul Dynasty organizational side, basically saying that, like, you know, if you want the Chinese money, you have to kiss up to China, something like that. It's a very weird story and some weird situations. But what followed was a boycott by the Chinese teams, the Shanghai Dragons, Chengdu Hunters, Guangzhou Charge, Hangzhou Spark, of these four teams basically boycotting anything that Saebyeolbe was involved in, other than official matches, right? So they wouldn't scrim against Saebyeolbe or do press events with Saebyeolbe or anything like that. The only thing they would do are official matches because they weren't going to sacrifice and sabotage their own matches to for that reason. Yesterday, the day I'm recording this video, but yesterday, as of you're the ones watching it, we saw basically statements released by the Shanghai Dragons, Chengdu Hunters, Guangzhou Charge, Hangzhou Spark, as well as the Seoul Dynasty, but the ones released by the other four teams, the Chinese teams, were all the same. It was the same statement, and it read, our team is very concerned about the voices from our community and among our fans, and we respect the many emotions that have arisen due to the team's viewpoints previously expressed. Through the active involvement of the Overwatch League and with collaboration from the teams involved, we recently had many rounds of discussion and have finally reached an agreement on this incident. Meanwhile, all teams have agreed that providing the best competitive matches for our fans around the world is the number one priority. We will resume normal activities with each other based on mutual respect and unity, and we look forward to making our fans proud in the upcoming tournaments. Thank you, everyone. And basically what comes down to this, of course, all four teams posting the same thing. I think what you basically have to take away from this is the Overwatch League basically took these teams to the side and said, all right, look, I understand that there's stuff going on, and this is stuff that you find offensive or you don't enjoy it. You don't like that there's stuff talking about it, right? But at the end of the day, this league is something that you cannot boycott players over this stuff. I'm almost positive. I would be surprised, I should say. I would be surprised if there was no kind of penalty for Saebyeolbe. He probably got a fine or a suspension of some kind, because that makes sense. That is usually what happens in events like this, where they actually provide some type of penalty to players that speak out and stuff like this. And so it's interesting to see what happened. But this story to me is very interesting and something that I've been kind of following, but I also just know that it's such a slippery slope, and I'm not knowledgeable enough on the situation in China to really say for sure what is or isn't the correct path to go, and what is kind of the most appropriate thing to do in this situation. Because on one hand, I think that it is irresponsible for Saebyeolbe to make statements like that when they are such a very, very, very sensitive subject in China. But on the other hand, it's also, is it too much to boycott activities with a player because you didn't agree with something that he said? Maybe. And so for me, it's a very, very weird kind of middle ground thing where I feel like the solution is like both sides went a little too far, and you just got to work things out, and you just get the league involved, and the league got involved and said, hey, cut this out, here's what's going to happen. We don't know what they did, but we know they've been involved, we know they did something. And so that is something that I like to see, is the league basically taking a stand and saying we're not going to support this stuff happening, and we have to basically, or you all have to get this stuff solved now, or else, there will probably be other types of punishments for the organizations in the future. And that is something that I think is, it's interesting to see that at least the league is willing to not just acquiesce to teams and organizations in general, regardless of where they're from. Just the fact that the team is not just going to be like, okay, teams, we're going to give you everything that you want. Because the teams probably would want Saebyeolbe out of the league, potentially, for what he said. So it'll be interesting to see what happens, but I think this is a story that really is just kind of done and dusted, and they're going to just try to move on from it, and we'll see what happens in the future. But that's all I have for today. If there's anything that stood out to you, any story that was interesting to you, let me know in the comments down below. But that is all from me. So thank you so much for watching. Hope you're all staying safe and staying healthy. And until next time, bye-bye.